The rain had been falling all night, steady and cold, seeping into the cracks of the broken sidewalks and soaking the thin cardboard boxes that lined the alleys. Among those boxes, curled up under a threadbare blanket, was a girl no older than 17. Her name was Lily. She had learned to sleep through the noise of the city, the rumble of trucks, the shouts of drunks, the sirens that pierced the night, but she hadn't yet learned to sleep through hunger. Her stomach gnawed at her, twisting painfully as she lay on the damp ground, eyes shut tightly, whispering to herself that tomorrow might be better. Lily hadn't chosen this life. Once, not so long ago, she'd had a home. A small, warm apartment filled with the smell of her mother's cooking and the sound of laughter. But when her mother died suddenly from an illness, everything unraveled. Her father, consumed by grief and debt, disappeared, leaving Lily to fend for herself. At first, she tried to keep the apartment, working odd jobs, scrubbing floors, running errands. But without family or support, the rent piled up. She lost the only home she had ever known. Now, the streets were her shelter, the sky her ceiling, and survival her daily challenge. Despite the harshness of her life, Lily's heart had not grown cold. She had nothing, no money, no comfort, not even consistent food, but she still carried inside her a quiet, stubborn kindness. She noticed people. She saw the forgotten faces others ignored. That morning, as the rain began to ease and gray light broke through the clouds, Lily pulled herself from her damp corner and wandered the streets in search of scraps. Her hair clung to her cheeks, her clothes heavy with water, but her eyes remained bright, scanning, searching, hopeful in their own fragile way. Near the corner of an old bakery, she saw him. An old man, slumped against the wall, his hands trembling as he tried to hold a piece of bread that had clearly been tossed aside, mold creeping over the crust. His clothes were torn, his shoes nearly gone, and his eyes, his eyes, were clouded with shame and desperation. He was trying to eat, but his body was so weak that even chewing seemed to exhaust him. Passers-by walked past, avoiding his gaze, pretending he wasn't there. Something inside Lily ached. She knew that feeling, the emptiness, the desperation, the sting of invisibility. Without hesitating, she walked closer, crouched down, and gently took the ruined bread from his hands. "You can't eat this," she whispered softly. The man looked up at her, startled, as if he couldn't believe someone had spoken to him with kindness. Lily reached into the small cloth bag she carried, her only possession, and pulled out the half sandwich she had saved from the night before. It wasn't much, but it was fresh enough. She broke it in half and placed it carefully in his hands. "Here," she said, smiling faintly. "Eat this instead." The old man's eyes filled with tears. He stared at her, his lips trembling, then took a shaky bite. The gratitude in his expression was so raw that it nearly broke her. For a moment, they simply sat there, two souls lost in a world that had forgotten them, sharing a meal, sharing humanity. What Lily didn't know was that just across the street, standing under the awning of a sleek black car, someone was watching. His name was Daniel Mercer. He was a man the city knew well, a wealthy CEO of a large company, always in the headlines, praised for his business acumen and criticized for his ruthless decisions. But today, Daniel wasn't here as the powerful CEO. Today, he was just a father, waiting outside the bakery while his young son picked out pastries inside. Daniel had seen Lily. He had seen her soaked clothes, her bare feet, the quiet dignity with which she gave away the only food she had. Something inside him shifted. For years, he had been building his empire, making deals, chasing profits. He told himself it was for his son, to give him a future after his wife had passed away, leaving Daniel a single father. But in the process, he had grown blind to the suffering around him. Until this moment, the sight of a homeless girl, hungry herself, giving her last bit of food to a starving elder struck him in a place he thought had long gone numb. He couldn't look away. His son, Jacob, came bounding out of the bakery, holding a small bag of sweet rolls. "Dad, let's go," he said cheerfully. But Daniel's eyes were fixed on Lily. "Wait," he murmured. The old man finished the sandwich, tears still streaming down his face. He clasped Lily's hand and whispered something that Daniel couldn't hear, but Lily's gentle nod and smile said enough. Then, she stood up and walked away, back into the anonymity of the city. Daniel's heart was pounding. He had the power to change things. He had the resources to transform lives. But he had never felt so confronted with the reality of someone's quiet heroism. He looked down at his son, who was watching curiously. "Dad, who is she?" Jacob asked. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he made a decision that would alter the course of all their lives. For the next several days, Daniel had his driver quietly follow Lily at a distance. He saw where she slept, how she scavenged for food, how she sometimes gave away even what little she had to others who were worse off. He saw her shivering at night, her lips turning blue in the cold, yet still wrapping her blanket around a stray dog she had befriended. He saw her picking up trash to earn a few coins, then buying bread to split with other homeless children. She was invisible to the world, but to him, she shone brighter than anyone he had ever known. Daniel couldn't shake the thought, why should someone with a heart like hers be left to rot on the streets? Finally, one evening, as the sun dipped low and the city lights began to flicker on, Daniel approached her. Lily was sitting on the steps of an abandoned building, humming softly to herself, trying to keep her spirits alive. When the shadow of a tall man fell across her, she looked up cautiously, ready to run if needed. "Don't be afraid," Daniel said gently. His suit and polished shoes made him look completely out of place in her world, but his eyes carried something she hadn't seen in a long time: sincerity. He handed her a warm meal in a takeout box. "You don't know me, but I've seen the way you care for others. You shouldn't have to live like this." Lily hesitated, suspicion and survival instinct warring with her hunger. But eventually, she accepted the box and opened it, inhaling the warmth. She whispered, "Why are you helping me?" Daniel paused, his gaze flicking to the sky as if searching for the right words. "Because sometimes the world overlooks the people who deserve the most. And because you reminded me of something I'd forgotten: kindness." That night was the beginning of a new chapter. Slowly, carefully, Daniel offered Lily opportunities. A safe place to stay. Access to food, clothes, education. At first, she resisted, afraid it was temporary, afraid it would all vanish like smoke. But with his patience and his son's innocent friendship, Jacob adored her instantly. Lily began to believe again. She began to dream again. What Daniel didn't expect was how much Lily would change him, too. In her presence, he found humility, compassion, a softness he thought he had buried with his late wife. She reminded him, day after day, that true strength lay not in wealth or power, but in love, in selflessness, in choosing to see the unseen. The girl who once had nothing slowly built a new life, not just for herself, but for others. With Daniel's support, she later started a foundation for the homeless, dedicating her life to lifting others from the shadows she had once known too well. And it all began on a rainy morning, when a homeless girl shared her last meal with a starving elder, unaware that a man standing behind her, a CEO, a single father, was watching. A man who would not just change her life, but whose own life would be transformed forever. Lily stared at the man in front of her, still clutching the warm takeout box as though it might vanish. The food smelled so good it made her stomach twist, but her eyes stayed on him, searching for hidden motives. On the streets, kindness often came with strings attached, and she had learned the hard way that nothing was ever truly free. Daniel sensed her hesitation. He didn't push, didn't demand trust. Instead, he crouched down so his gaze met hers at eye level. "You don't have to take anything more than the food," he said gently. "Eat. That's all I ask." His voice was calm, soothing in a way that disarmed her. Finally, Lily nodded, her fingers trembling as she lifted a spoonful of rice and chicken into her mouth. Warmth spread through her chest, not just from the food but from the fact that, for once, someone had noticed her without disgust. She ate slowly, savoring every bite, while Daniel sat quietly a few feet away, giving her space. After several minutes, she whispered, "Why me? There are so many out here. Why are you helping me?" Daniel looked at her with a softness he rarely allowed himself. "Because you helped someone when you had nothing. I saw it. That kind of heart deserves a chance." Lily lowered her eyes, embarrassed. "It wasn't anything. He was hungrier than me." "That's exactly why it matters," Daniel replied. For the first time in years, Lily felt tears welling in her eyes. She quickly wiped them away, ashamed to show weakness. But Daniel noticed. He didn't comment, he simply extended his hand. "My car is nearby. I can take you somewhere warm tonight. No obligations, no tricks. Just a safe place to sleep." Her instinct screamed at her to refuse. The streets had taught her that safety was an illusion. Yet something in his tone, something in the way his young son peeked shyly from the car window behind him, made her pause. She nodded, just once. That night, Lily slept in a clean bed for the first time in months. She curled up under soft blankets, breathing in the scent of lavender soap that lingered on the sheets, and for a moment, she almost forgot she was homeless. She almost believed she was just a normal girl again. But trust was not built in a single night. Over the following weeks, Lily tested Daniel's kindness in quiet, cautious ways. She expected him to grow tired of her, to send her back to the streets once the novelty wore off. But he didn't. He asked nothing of her but that she eat, rest, and slowly think about her future. His son, Jacob, grew attached to her quickly. At only 8 years old, Jacob had lost his mother young and had spent much of his life surrounded by adults who were too busy, too formal. But Lily talked to him like a friend, laughed at his silly jokes, and listened to his stories about school. They became inseparable, like siblings who had always known each other. One evening, Jacob tugged at Daniel's sleeve and whispered, "Can Lily stay with us forever?" Daniel's chest tightened at the innocence in his son's voice. He didn't answer right away. The truth was, he wanted the same thing, but life wasn't that simple. Daniel faced pressure from all sides. His board of directors questioned his sudden absences, his growing interest in charitable projects, his use of company resources to fund shelters and food programs. They accused him of losing focus, of letting emotions cloud his judgment. Some even whispered that helping a random street girl would tarnish his image. One night, in his office, a senior partner confronted him directly. "Daniel, this isn't good for business. We're here to make profits, not run a charity." People are beginning to talk. Daniel's jaw clenched. He thought of Lily, her resilience, her laughter with Jacob, her quiet gratitude for every small kindness. "Maybe it's time they do talk," he replied coldly. "Because what's the point of all this money if we can't use it to actually change lives?" The partner shook his head, frustrated. "You're going to ruin everything you've built." But Daniel wasn't swayed. In Lily, he had seen something he couldn't ignore. Meanwhile, Lily herself was struggling with a storm of emotions. She was grateful, yes, but also overwhelmed. Every time she looked in the mirror at her clean clothes and combed hair, she felt like an imposter. A voice inside her whispered that she didn't belong here, that this life wasn't hers. She worried constantly that Daniel's kindness was temporary, that one day he would wake up and realize she wasn't worth the trouble. One night, as she sat in the quiet of her borrowed room, she confided in Jacob. "What if your dad sends me away?" she asked softly. Jacob frowned. "He won't. He likes you. I like you. You're family now." Family. The word hit her like a wave. She hadn't heard it in so long that it felt foreign on her tongue. But the world wasn't done testing her. A month later, while walking back from a small errand, Lily was stopped by a group of kids from her old neighborhood, kids who had once mocked her for being poor, who now sneered at her clean clothes and accused her of being a sellout. "Look at you," one of them spat. "Think you're better than us now? Living with rich people, huh? Don't forget where you came from." Their words cut deep, reopening wounds she thought were healing. That night, she packed a small bag and tried to slip out quietly, convinced she didn't deserve the life Daniel was offering. But Daniel found her standing at the door, tears streaming down her face. "Where are you going?" he asked gently. "I don't belong here," she whispered. "People like me, we don't get second chances. I don't want to be a burden." Daniel stepped closer, his voice firm but kind. "Listen to me. You are not a burden. You're a blessing. Do you think Jacob laughs like that with anyone else? Do you think I've felt this kind of hope in years? You belong here as much as anyone. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Her defenses crumbled. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe him. From that day forward, Lily embraced the opportunities before her. She enrolled in school again, timid at first but gradually finding her footing. She discovered she was a quick learner, excelling in literature and art. Teachers who had once pitied her now praised her talent and determination. Daniel watched her transformation with pride. But more than that, he realized how much she had transformed him. His company began funding shelters, food banks, and education programs, not as a publicity stunt, but as a genuine mission. Investors doubted him, critics mocked him, but he stood firm. And slowly, others began to see the results. Years passed. Lily grew from the shy, uncertain girl he had met on the streets into a confident young woman with a vision. She started her own foundation for homeless youth, determined to be the helping hand she had once needed. Daniel supported her every step of the way, but the drive came from her. At her foundation's opening ceremony, Lily stood at the podium, her voice steady, her eyes shining. "I was once invisible," she told the crowd. "But someone saw me. And because of that, I get to stand here today. This foundation isn't just for me, it's for every person out there who feels forgotten. You are not invisible. You matter." Daniel stood in the audience, Jacob by his side, both of them filled with pride. He thought back to that rainy morning years ago, when he had first seen a homeless girl give away her last bit of food. He had thought then that he was going to change her life. But the truth was, she had changed his. The applause thundered through the hall, but all Lily heard was the quiet echo of her mother's voice in her heart, whispering that she was proud. For the first time in a long time, Lily believed it too. And so the story came full circle. A girl who once had nothing gave everything she had, and in doing so, set off a chain of kindness that would ripple through countless lives. Because sometimes, the smallest act, a sandwich shared on a rainy day, can spark a transformation powerful enough to change the world. Lily's speech at the foundation's opening ceremony echoed long after the applause faded. People were moved, some even in tears, but not everyone who watched was convinced. For every heart she touched, there were skeptics waiting to question her worth. That night, as she sat in her small office within the foundation's building, Lily looked at the growing stack of letters from kids on the streets, pleas for help, gratitude, hope. She smiled faintly, tracing her fingers over their words. But then her eyes shifted to a harsh headline on her desk: "Street Girl Turned Charity Face, Real Changer CEO's Pity Project." The words stung more than she wanted to admit. No matter how hard she worked, there were always whispers that she didn't deserve this platform, that she was only there because Daniel Mercer had taken her in. She stared at the article, anger and sadness rising in her chest. She wanted to prove them wrong, but the weight of expectation pressed heavily on her shoulders. Daniel noticed her quietness over dinner that night. Jacob was chattering happily about a school project, but Lily barely touched her food. When Jacob went upstairs, Daniel leaned forward. "Talk to me. What's on your mind? She hesitated, then pushed the newspaper toward him. They're saying I don't deserve this. That everything I've built is just because of you. Daniel's jaw tightened. He hated seeing her hurt. Do you believe that? She looked down, whispering, sometimes I wonder. Lily, he said firmly, his voice gentler than his expression, what you've done, what you've built, is yours. I may have opened a door, but you walked through it. You're the one running this foundation. You're the one kids look up to. Not me. Don't let a headline erase that. His words comforted her, but they didn't erase the doubts gnawing inside. That night, she dreamed of her mother again. In the dream, she was small, curled up in her mother's lap, listening to her hum a lullaby. She felt safe. But then the dream shifted, the apartment empty, the silence unbearable, her father's shadow vanishing through the door, leaving her behind. She woke up with tears on her cheeks. The next morning, determined to face her fears, Lily began to share her story publicly. She gave interviews, not shying away from her painful past but embracing it. She spoke about her mother's warmth, about the nights of hunger, about the shame of being invisible. People listened, not to a polished success story, but to a girl who had lived what so many were still living. But just as her message was spreading, new resistance rose from within Daniel's own company. A faction of the board began pushing to remove him as CEO, arguing that his focus on social causes was costing them profits. They whispered that he was distracted, compromised, too emotionally invested in his charity girl. One evening, Daniel sat in his office long after dark, staring at the city lights. The thought of losing his company didn't scare him for himself, it scared him for the work he could no longer support, for Lily's foundation, for the thousands who depended on the changes he was making. When Lily came to check on him, she found him hunched over, the weight of the world on his shoulders. Tell me what's wrong, she said softly. He sighed, rubbing his temples. They're trying to force me out. The board thinks I've lost sight of what matters. And have you? She asked gently. He looked at her, startled, until he saw the quiet strength in her eyes. She wasn't doubting him, she was reminding him of his purpose. No, he said at last. Not at all. Then fight for it, she told him. Not for me. Not even for Jacob. Fight because you know what you're doing is right. Her words lit a fire in him again. For years, Daniel had fought battles in boardrooms for money, power, expansion. But now, for the first time, he was fighting for something far more important, humanity. The next board meeting was brutal. Suits sat around the long mahogany table, voices sharp, accusations flying. You're bleeding the company dry with your charity work. One director snapped. Daniel stood, his voice calm but commanding. This company is stronger than it's ever been. And do you know why? Because people want to believe in more than profit. They want to believe in purpose. We are not just building wealth, we're building a legacy. If you can't see that, then perhaps you don't belong here. The room fell silent. Some directors shifted uncomfortably, others glared, but a few, just a few, nodded. The tide wasn't fully turned, but Daniel had planted a seed. Meanwhile, Lily faced her own test. A rival CEO, eager to discredit Daniel, began digging into her past. Soon, tabloids splashed her story across front pages. X-Street Girl's dark past, was she involved in petty crime? They dredged up incidents from her hardest years, moments when she had stolen scraps to survive, when she had begged, when she had fought other kids for food. Lily was devastated. She felt her carefully built reputation crumbling, her foundation at risk. She wanted to hide, to disappear again. But Daniel and Jacob refused to let her. One night, as she sat in the living room staring blankly at the headlines, Jacob climbed into her lap. Don't listen to them, he said simply. They don't know you like we do. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She hugged him tightly, whispering, thank you. The next day, instead of running, Lily called a press conference. Cameras flashed as she stood at the podium, trembling but resolute. Yes, she said boldly. I stole food when I was starving. I fought to survive when no one cared if I lived or died. That's my truth. And I will not be ashamed of it, because it made me who I am today. If you think that disqualifies me from helping others, then maybe you've never been truly hungry. But I will not stop, because there are kids out there right now living the life I once lived, and they deserve a chance too. The room was silent for a moment before the applause began. This time, it wasn't polite, it was thunderous, raw, unstoppable. The very thing that was meant to destroy her had become her strength. From that day forward, Lily was no longer just the girl Daniel Mercer helped. She was a leader in her own right, a voice for the voiceless. People didn't just respect her, they believed in her. Years later, standing before a crowd of hundreds at a charity gala, Lily spoke again. I once gave away my last sandwich to a starving elder, thinking it was nothing. But that small act changed everything. It brought me here. It taught me that kindness, no matter how small, is never wasted. In the audience, Daniel and Jacob sat side by side, pride shining in their eyes. Daniel thought back to that rainy morning, to the moment he had first seen her. He realized something profound. He had thought he was the one saving her, but the truth was, she had saved him too. Because sometimes, the greatest transformations begin not with wealth, not with power, but with the simplest act of compassion.